and what we're talking about tonight. My name is Deborah Cosdress, and I'm from the University of South Florida Gussie Stavros Center for Free Enterprise and Economic Education. And they say sometimes that it takes a village, and it does for us with our financial literacy. I invited some people to present with me today because our financial literacy effort does take a village, because I have some fabulous people that work with us and help us with everything we're doing in financial literacy. And today we are pleased to have Lou Bacino with us today. He is one of our, oh my goodness, I have him down as State Farm, and he is not State Farm at all. I'm sorry. Lou, I'm so sorry. He is here today to speak with us about saving and investing in a post-COVID world, especially about real estate, and you're really going to enjoy him. He's our guest speaker today. And we have today Jody Pushkin from the Tampa Bay Times newspaper and education program, because we work closely with the newspaper and education program, because we find articles in the Tampa Bay Times and we use those to create lessons. And that's the other person we have with us today is Brittany Sampson, who teaches in Lakeland at Lakeland High, but she also works part-time at the USF Stavros Center, helping us to develop some lessons for teachers, and we'll be sharing some of these today. But first of all, I just wanted to thank State Farm for sponsorship. This is part of our financial literacy series, and sponsored by State Farm. And Arlo Henderson is here today. He's actually the person from State Farm. I don't know what was on my brain. And he is going to, Arlo, would you like to say hello tonight to the teachers?
Sure. I'll take a minute to say hello.
Okay.
First of all, thank you all for the incredible job that you do normally, but even more so during this challenging time of the pandemic, dealing with virtual school and, kids coming in and out in masks and all that. I think it just kind of reinforces the idea of the importance of what the job that you do and how important it is for you to mold and challenge our future generations to be better, and to also relive them to their dreams as well. So thank you very much for the job that you do. We at State Farm truly appreciate you. I, like I said, as a child of educators, and my sister's an educator as well, grandparents, educators. It's a big part of my life, always has been. So I really, truly appreciate and understand the sacrifices not only you, but you and your families make to make this possible for us to provide education to the kids and the future generation of America. So thank you very much. And if we could ever do anything else to help you here at State Farm, don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And so also today we are going to be sharing some of the materials we've created with the Tampa Bay Times newspaper and education program. And Jody Pushkin is here with you today. And Jody, I've put Jody's information on the screen. jpushkin@tampabay.com. And Jody, because we're going to be sharing some of the materials we've created together, but in case you have not used the newspaper and education and would like more information.
Deborah, I don't see anything on the screen other than AH.
Oh.
Okay. You're not sharing.
It stopped sharing. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you so much. I'm not sure what happened. Let me just stop sharing.
Oh, Deb, it was sharing. It was what happened is it lights up, or it spotlights the person who's speaking, and so your shared screen was minimized, but it was there.
Oh, okay.
So if someone sees it disappear, it's there. You just have to find it. It's been minimized.
Okay, so let me see if it's now going to share. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for letting me know. Sometimes these crazy things can happen. Okay, and I don't always see. So Jody is here, and she's going to help us share some of the she spotlighted us on their Tampa Bay Times newspaper and education page. So that's all of their resources, and she spotlighted us here on their page with our Use the News materials that we do, which we'll share a little bit of in a little bit. Jody, do you just want to say anything before we move on?
I just want to say, if anybody has any questions or if you need resources that you hear about, please feel free to email me. I am happy to help. You will have access to the digital edition of the Times, and if you're not sure how to access that, you can just email me.
Okay, thanks so much, Jody.
Well,
And then moving on to the next slide, these are, now this is with some newspaper articles from the Tampa Bay Times, and using and having Brittany work with me, Brittany Sampson. We've created some great activities for saving and investing, and I'll just kind of share one of those pages with you. And I'll let you know that all of the links for today are on a Canvas page, and I will share that Canvas page in the I'll share that Canvas page with you in right now in the chat. So if you see the chat, oops, but it's not letting, oh, I'm sorry, not in the chat. So all of these resources are going to be on this Canvas page, so that anything that I talk about today, you'll be able to access them there. And as soon as my chat page comes up, I will type the message in there.
can I just interrupt real quick?
Yes.
If you are not on mute, please put your microphone on mute, because there's a little bit of a feedback. Thank you.
Okay.
That's because some of our speakers are not muted for later.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Someone else is muted.
So that's I think I shared the resources page. There it goes. So that's the resources page, and the resources page are all on the Canvas page, and that includes the Google Slides I'm going to be doing today, and as well all of these resources we'll be talking about. So the first link brings you to our this is what our resources look like on our financial literacy web page blog that we put together. And what we did for all of the standards for financial literacy, we've put them by topics, and this happens to be the savings page. And when you're on the savings page, you can see this embedded link where we have put all of our blog posts that have student guides. Some of them have student guides, and some of them are blog posts without student guides, and they have the standards that they're connected to. So you'll be able to find those. And for example, if I then go to the blog, this is where our latest post is, and this is one that Brittany worked on with me, and it's about buying things on the internet. So they're set up like a blog post, and then we have the newspaper articles embedded in them, so they're easy for you, and you could download the newspaper articles for your students. And then as you scroll through them, you also see that some of them we've created a Nearpod activity, and it's just taking a while for the link to come up with the Nearpod link. So we have Nearpod activities, and we also have student guides that we have created to go with these. And Brittany, do you want to just mention a little bit about the student guides and your use of them in the classroom as well, while it's coming up here?
Sure. There are several different lessons that have been created that have the study guides, and it is a student guide essentially that is ready for use in the classroom for a teacher to use to teach specific personal finance standards through an inquiry-based, engaging strategy, I guess you could say, where it's a lot of question, answer, and a lot of them rely on student opinions, which students aren't used to too much in the classroom. A lot of times they're told this is right, this is wrong. So I had the opportunity to use this with students last year, and it went very, very well. The students who may not typically be as excited about participating or necessarily completing their work were completing and doing well, and they were eager to have conversation. And it was a nice surprise. Teaching seniors, sometimes you don't get, the best feedback with students. They are so ready to be finished with school. And anyway, so this is a really fun one in particular, but there are several that I would encourage you to take a look at if you're looking for something that's ready-made for the classroom.
Absolutely. And what's nice about them is the newspaper articles are all there. They're all articles from the Tampa Bay Times from our collaboration. And then Brittany has made these wonderful, like it's ready to go student guides. So that's all the teacher really needs. And we have, she's continuing to work with us and create more of them. So those are some resources that you could find later on as you're looking through the resources. If anyone has any questions while we're going through, please feel free to raise your hand to ask a question, or just ask it out loud, or put it in the chat if you have any questions or comments. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start into an activity that we've put together, and this starts with, because we're moving from the saving and investing, kind of honing it down into looking at real estate as a topic, because that's what Lou is going to be, our guest speaker is going to be speaking about today. So I'm just going to start it with an Engage clip that we found from the movie Inside Out. It's a moving house scene.
Nice on the inside.
We're supposed to live here?
I'm telling you, it smells like something died in here.
Did you die from moving?
Guys, you're overreacting. Nobody is dying. A dead mouse!
Good.
I'm gonna be sick.
In the house of the dead, what are we gonna do? We're gonna get rabies! Get off of me!
Hey. All through the drive, Dad talked about how cool our new room is. Let's go check it out.
It's gonna be great. Yes. No.
I'm starting to envy the dead mouse.
Get out the rubber ball. We're in solitary confinement.
Riley can't live here.
He's right.
It's the worst.
Really bad.
It's absolutely the worst.
This house is
The worst place I've ever been in my entire life.
yeah.
Hey, it's nothing our butterfly curtains couldn't fix. I read somewhere that an empty room is an opportunity.
Where did you read that?
It doesn't matter. I read it, and it's great. We'll put the bed there and the desk over there.
The hockey lamp goes there. Put the chair there.
Well, the trophy plush
Over
over there.
there. Poster there.
Stars.
We need more. I like that.
Now we're talking. Let's go get our stuff from the moving van.
Okay, so we saw what happened in that. Oops, sorry, it's starting again. I have to move my cursor over to make it move. So we saw what's happening in that scene about Riley moving, and she's moving to a new place. And so what we did was, if there's anyone here from elementary, what we did was these are some resources that Sherry Moser, who also works with us, has created. She's created some resources that deal with some of the elementary standards, buying, saving, and of course, limited resources, and looking at decision making. And so what you can do is you can access, I put links to these resources, so you could access these resources that we've created that are like a little PowerPoint book. So you can use them with your students to read through and look at these economic concepts and financial literacy concepts. Like this is what could I buy, needs and wants. So it's very simple for early elementary. People want things, people need things to live, food, clothing, shelter. And people use money to buy what they want or need, and so on. So you can see how they look. They're like realistic books that we made with PowerPoint. And so after you share one of those with your students, you can then have them look back at the film and say, well, what are Riley's wants and needs for her room? What do you think that she really needs for her room versus her wants? And we made some other questions. So the one on buying and saving is about buying goods and saving money. And so what goods should Riley buy for her room? How can Riley save money on her wants? And also for limited resources, it's very similar. It's a little book like that, like we showed. And Riley has limited resources, and how could she make good choices for her room? So these are like some very basic for elementary students to learn about making choices and thinking about saving on those purchases for your youngest of youngest students. And then what we also did was this was an activity that that Brittany thought up, and we thought, you know, there was quite a dreary room that that Riley was moving into, but that doesn't mean the room has to look awful. So we came up with a few ideas that you could use for designing a perfect room. So I know Jody told me that if you're using the Tampa Bay Times newspaper in education, you can always look on Saturdays, and I believe it's Wednesdays. That's when the flyers come, and you can use the online version. And that's all free to teachers. And if you don't know how to use that, you'll be able to talk to, you can email Jody afterwards and she'll hook you up.
It's actually Wednesday and Sunday.
Oh, Wednesday. Did I say Saturday?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, Wednesday and Sunday versions. So you can find flyers that, you know, your students can use the virtual flyers, and they can see furniture and other accessories and, you know, create a bird's eye view of the room. And the students can conduct research online. And once they've chosen furniture, have them create a room, and then have them make decisions with a limited budget. So there's so much you could do with that, depending on whether what kind of a room, what kind of activities are in the room. And this is something Lou's going to talk about later, is he's going to talk about how some of our rooms have actually changed during COVID as these multi-purpose rooms we're thinking about. So think about that room that Riley could have, and you could have them put things in it. And if you're in PowerPoint, you can have them move when you're in the version, when you're not projecting the screen like I am right now. You can have students move things around on the screen and put things in the screen. So you can like place Riley in her room. You can, you know, drag her in the room, and then you can resize. They can resize her, and then they can decorate the room as they choose, and put things in the room. And that's something your students could do virtually if they want, which is kind of fun to have. They can put speech bubbles in it, you know, how, you know, Riley can talk about, you know, what she's going to do in her room. So that's certainly another activity that you could do with your students. And
which, Deb, can I interject something real quick?
Yes, please.
So I'm listening to the activity that may be for upper elementary or middle school students. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking that something that you could do, depending upon your students, I'm not sure that I would do it with my seniors. It really depends on the level of your students. But depending upon what you're doing and how you're doing it, if you use classified ads, you could turn this into a budgeting lesson and have them find, you know, give them X amount of dollars and have them spend to furnish the room. And which, you know, maybe high school students might enjoy, given the fact a lot of them are excited to move out, and they may not really know what it takes to move out and furnish. I mean, no, that's not living expenses, but you could turn that into a budgeting activity for older students if you wanted.
Okay, thank you so much. And then, of course, we also have some more Use the News lessons, like we've shared the Use the News lessons. We have, does mortgage manipulate your mind and wallet? Can you afford to move out and live on your own when you make minimum wage? And should I rent or should I buy? These are activities that that Brittany and I worked on together. So I'll just share those quickly with you. These are some of the Nearpod activities we created. So I'm just sharing If I move down to the mortgage, does a mortgage manipulate both your mind and your wallet? We created this as a Nearpod lesson, so you can use that with your students. And it also has the blog post with the student guide. So there are quite a few different, different ready-made student guide lessons that you can use with your students, especially considering this is Financial Literacy Month. So we have, well, not yet. In a couple of days, we're going into April, which will be Financial Literacy Month. And the nice thing is these all have their student guides, and then they're all based on real world activities. They're standards based, and they have the newspaper articles that they came from. So really helps your students connect things to the real world, and so that's that. There are 3 more lessons there that I've put links to that you can check out after the session. Brittany, did you want to share anything with one of those that you've done before?
I think it was does a mortgage manipulate your mind and wallet? Mm-hmm. That was the activity that they had to sketch or create individuals that would be likely to make budgeting decisions in specific ways, and you kind of come up with these scenarios. I don't know. I think one of the biggest things, especially to teach seniors or students that are, in high school, is that they have to justify everything, because the real world doesn't have always that right answer or that wrong answer. Sometimes there's good, better, best. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I think that one in particular had a good. They just had a blast. I think that something else you could do is let them pick characters that they're familiar with, whether they're from a TV show or, a Netflix movie or something like that. Students will often have a lot of fun when they can come up with ideas that relate to people that they're excited about, or a famous individual that, whoever the flavor of the month is, whoever they're excited about, try and tie in.
And of course, this is something that Brittany and I have spoken about quite a bit, is can you afford to move out? When you are, especially thinking about our students who think, I'm going to move out, I've threatened to move out, and I can certainly support myself even though they're making minimum wage. And she really goes into helping her students understand, some of the things that are going on in their minds and what it takes to actually afford a place. And the whole idea here was based on a newspaper article. We found that a modest 2-bedroom apartments are not affordable. Much to students' surprise, right, Brittany?
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that's important in this particular lesson is standard of living. And some students can't wait to move to California or Las Vegas. They're going to go to New York. And, you talk about, what does that really mean? What is the $100 going to buy you?
Absolutely. So, and they looked at the expenditures in different cities. So, that's something that's a reality for our students that they don't often really know. So, and then we also have some other these are just some other links that you will find on the link I sent you. There are, we had created a lesson a couple of years ago on buying versus renting with Disney that included some infographics. I'm just going to click on that so that you can, and it can be as easy as having your students do a rent or buy decision tree where they do the marginal costs and marginal benefits of renting versus buying, and then create a decision with it. And when I showed these to Brittany, she really liked the idea. And I'll just scroll down on that group of activities. because what we did there was we found quite a few interesting infographics that are online. There were about 4 infographics, and the students have to read the infographics, which is really great because the students get to read a different type of text and then compare back and forth between renting and buying. And I know when I spoke with Brittany, she said, oh, you know, it'd be kind of neat, it would be kind of interesting to have the students then create their own infographic afterwards with their side, whether they think the renting or buying was a better idea. Brittany, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Kids love infographics, and I think sometimes it can overwhelm them. So, because they think, oh, I have no artistic ability, or I can't come up with these graphics. So to show them examples that you think are acceptable or that will help guide them. But then make sure that when you ask them to create the infographic, that it's with a concept that you've not already provided an example with. You'll find students, no matter what the activity is, will try and take the easy way out. You guys that are veteran teachers know this already. So the suggestion that I have after I use this in my classroom in different ways, where I have my students create infographics, is to make sure the examples I show them are not exactly what I want them to give me, because then they will copy. You know, it's a good chance to insert that whole plagiarism concept, and you can take ideas, but let's, you know, how do you make it your own, and what does that mean? What does that look like? Things like that. So, but they like it, and it gives them time. There's a lot of students that are good with visual arts, depending upon their interests. And sometimes I have some great ones that come up because the kids will get super into designing something online. But it just depends on how you're teaching this year as well, whether you've got virtual students or hybrid classes, or they're face-to-face students, as far as what you're going to want to end up doing.
And then I also put a few more connections that are really that you could check out on the link that I provided for resources. My Florida CFO has great information on buying a home, a web-based information. They also have calculator links for making decisions about buying and renting, and making other decisions about mortgages. They also have, there are also some engaging activities at My Florida CFO Finance Your Future is an interactive platform where they have some activities about home ownership and real estate. And there's also some other calculators that are on cost of living and should I buy or rent. So those are some other activities that are something you could do with your students. And then what we did is I just put, I'm not going to read through these. These are some of the standards connections that I made with financial literacy standards in elementary, middle, and high school, and also with language arts and mathematics standards, so that you could check those out when you are doing your activities. And now we come to the second part of our session, which is, I think, the exciting part. And now we have more members of our team that are certainly part of our village, our wonderful village. We have, I just wanted to mention that Jennifer Fitzsimmons, that you may know her name because she's been helping you sign up for these sessions and sending you reminders. Jennifer is here with you today. With any questions you have, you can ask her, and she is helping also in the chat if you have any questions. And also we have the director of our center, Dr. Dick Puglisi. He's here, and I'm going to invite Dick Puglisi to introduce our special guest, Lou Bacino, who's on our Stavros Center Advocacy Board. And so, Dick, would you like to, are you ready to introduce?
I am more than ready, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you so much
for that introduction. Yes, it's my great pleasure today to introduce the teachers to a wonderful gentleman who I've known for approximately 30 years. And I've known him for that length of time because years ago, when we were starting what we call our advocacy board, Lou was one of the very first business leaders that I invited to join that group. Now, for those of you who don't know what our advocacy board is, let me just explain for a minute. Over the years when we've been in operation, we have met lots and lots of business and community leaders. And we have invited a subgroup of that larger group to be on our board as advocates. Now, some people say, why don't you have an advisory committee? Because really and truly, what we really need are people who can advocate for our mission and for the work that we do with the teachers. And Lou was one of the very first people to join us. And at the time, he was with a company that I'm sure that you'll recognize. At the time was called Citigroup, and now it's called Citi. It's a multinational company that has one of its headquarters here in Tampa. And Lou was with that group. Lou is an attorney, and as you can see by Deborah's screen, that he also has a boutique real estate investment development firm. So it's been a great pleasure. Lou has always been there at the ready to speak to teachers, to share his experiences, insights, and expertise in terms of multinational corporations and real estate with our teachers. So we're always glad to have him. I don't want to say too much because I know a part of his presentation, he's going to tell you a little bit about himself and his background. But Lou, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a joy to have you on our board. We hope you stay with us for many more years because we have lots and lots of teachers that need desperately support from us and from our friends in the business community. Lou?
And I'm just going to put, Lou, I'll just put the script for what you're doing as you asked on the screen. So as you go through, teachers can follow. And just checking, Lou, can you see this on my screen?
I sure can. Thank you, Deborah.
Okay.
Let me interrupt a minute. Deborah, is there a reason why there are emails that are also shown?
Yes, because right before the session, when I already had Teams on, Lou said that it might be a good idea to have this showing. And when I tried to copy paste it into a Google Doc, Google kept, or a Word doc, it kept crashing because I'm already on Teams. So we decided to leave it as is, and then I will put it into a document so teachers can use it later.
Okay, very good. Thank
right
you.
Before the session, I never like to go out of Teams in case I have a problem getting back in.
No, I understand.
Okay, so that's why we're having it just show up like this right now. But I will be putting that in a document so that you will be able to have the script from what he has talked about today in as part of the resources for tonight. So Lou, did you want me to turn to any particular part of this, or did you want to start?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you both. And Dick, you're always so generous. I always feel better about myself after hearing what you have to say. I just wanted to mention at the start that having listened to the opening of the program today, that I believe the intent and the content today is a little bit more geared towards teachers and parents, typically making the homeowner decision. And I think there might be pieces of this which could flow down to the students as well, because students, of course, are children in the homes, and they have to participate in these rent buy and home design and home attribute decisions. They're ultimately one of the beneficiaries or one of the victims of the decision. So I wanted to make sure that we sort of had the intent and the audience in mind as I started my comments. I've given you a document that Deborah will reproduce in an even friendlier form that has some bullet points at the beginning and then some narrative. And I'm going to go to the narrative and kind of run through it because it kind of builds the background of what it is. I hope we can do a little Q&A and further discussion on. The origin of what I'm thinking about and presenting to you today comes from very gritty hands-on experience over the last, 20 or 30 years, but particularly I'm thinking the last 10 to 15 years, because all of us went through some very intense, difficult times in the market, in our careers, financially, real estate, and otherwise. In the last financial crisis and in the years since, when we've recovered nicely and find ourselves in a very hot market right now. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what I'm calling below origins, evolution, and transformation of what I see going on in the housing market. And the reason I'm kind of passionate about this is I think a lot of it is happening right before our eyes in ways that tend to get spun up by some of the more glamorous and some of the more obvious talking points, such as home values are going up and it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. Interest rates are low. There are a lot of talking points that are on people's lips that are very important because they are the logistics of the process, the tactics of the process. I want to talk a little bit about the context behind that. So let me just go through this with you very quickly, and then we'll get to hopefully what'll be a more robust discussion at the end. So starting off in the middle part of that document on your screen, there's the section called Origins. Just briefly, home ownership was a benchmark of the American dream. Through the creation and growth of the American middle class in post-World War II era. Begun under the Industrial Revolution and its expansion through the provisioning for and the execution of two transcendent world wars, America emerged in 1945 as the preeminent world power with a strong industrial base, excessive natural resources, and an expansive, energized population. So there we have the context coming out of World War II. When I call that our parents, most of us, that would be our parents' generation. Home ownership was an aspiration for an upwardly mobile and optimistic population. And the American middle class was motivated and monetized to seize this opportunity. Job creation provided the financial means, and natural resources, including land, materials, and mobility, provided the roadmap. Home ownership was historically privileged, and the growth of the U.S. middle class normalized the status. Although home ownership did not necessarily define you as a member of this or that class, it was usually at least a stepping stone. And if you were, by measurable economic terms, such as income and assets, middle class, then home ownership was typically now at your control and option, essentially a part of family planning. Homes were traditionally an end unto themselves for food, shelter, nurture, and sustenance. These gradually, however, were subsided by work outside of and beyond the home, initially for such as the family breadwinner and eventually for their spouses and children. Expanding education provided further fuel to enable acceleration of the process, as well as the tools for business creation, innovation, and expansion. During the familiar millennial era, the computer, mobile communications, and eventually the internet were all generally positive disruptors of the status quo, as were the aligned social transformations such as work-life balance, flexible work, work from home, dual careers, expanded and alternate work career expectancy, deferred retirement, expanded healthcare, and related extended life expectancy and their consequential significant expense. So that's a little backdrop of what I'm trying to talk about today. Let's talk about the evolution of the American home and home ownership. As means and needs expanded, so did the household. Pretty simplistically, by simply becoming larger, nicer, and more expensive over time. Not only to purchase, but similarly to maintain. Absolute practicality or utility value eventually gave way to ease of living, quality of living, and enjoyment of lifestyles. Homes became fulfillment, entertainment, and luxury items, often reflections of ego and the attainment more so than traditional purpose and necessity. All's well and good as long as GDP and something called household income continue to expand. The American home was typically known and described as the average family's largest and most dependable asset. There were financial support and underpinnings for this, including the secured home mortgage, construction efficiencies, and suburban development, all supported expansion of the economy, driving supply and demand for housing. In normal, so-called normal economic cycles, traditionally measured and governed by such indices as inflation, interest rates, affordability ratios, employment, GDP, et cetera, individuals and families could always belt-tighten and ride out the occasional recessionary storms, knowing full well that a robust recovery was, at least in the future, and usually inevitable, sometimes defined by an almost predictable period of a 5 to 7 year cycle. But a funny thing happened on the way to Florida in retirement. Basic life necessities started to become expensive. Not only housing, but education, travel, relocation, most essentials, as well as non-essentials. This would be referring to, let's say, the last 20 or so years. And quietly within this disruption of the normal economic cycle, the basic home utility and affordability had become stressful and challenged, at times a growing strain as well as a necessity. Some prominent social and economic commentators began to question the necessity and desirability of home ownership itself. If you followed the press and wonderful articles and great publications such as the Tampa Bay Times, you'll notice that a lot of those articles came out after the last recession in the later 2000 single digits, 2004, 5 to like 9, 10, where people coming out of it were starting to say, maybe we've made a mistake traditionally by pushing everyone into home ownership, particularly when you go through a period of the stress of home ownership and foreclosures and evictions and so forth. So that was a very interesting point to see in history. Now, finally, we're up to what I consider to be a transformational stage. The simple premise here is that the core desirability and fundamental benefit of home ownership, historically that being a wise decision, was in danger of becoming a burden due to a disproportionality of cost benefit. Too much was being spent for unessential benefit. Homes were becoming too large, too expensive, with less utility, flexibility, and sustainability. The most economic disruption over this past year to year and a half, the COVID pandemic and related economic disruption, made the point of essentially redefining the home as residence, workplace, daycare, school, often for an extended family. This required forced utility was being jammed on the American family, which was most often ill-prepared for that adjustment. And I guess I don't need to tell teachers about how difficult this adjustment has been. But this very disruption is perhaps a cruel but astute opportunity to re-examine our basic home buying decision and future planning. What is to be done with the American home? Work-life balance, design and utilization of residential, vocational, educational, recreational, and related space and utilities. Pretty logical question, given the transitional norm and plan for flexibility, while at the same time right-sizing and often in effect downsizing, at least from a cost-benefit point of view. Some components of this discussion and the tools you might use to make such a decision. Three-dimensional space, horizontal and vertical measurements, the fit and finish of homes, the total life cycle cost, including fixed and variable expenses of home ownership, manageable location, considering transportation, essential services nearby the home and workplace, and access to amenities, holding periods, allowing for amortization and appreciation. How long are you going to have a home, and what's going to determine how long you're in a various home? Durability, maintainability, floor plan flexibility, co-live and workspace, future expansion and modification, resale attractiveness, finance ability, required maintenance, timely replacements, and smart improvements, energy efficiency, green consideration, trends, and finally vanity control, keeping ourselves under control and what we need our house to say about us. Several favorite tools and techniques are to ask yourself and family members and builders, interior designers, real estate agents, repeatedly and forcibly, what exactly is live workspace? What is the living room? What is the dining room? What and where are family utility spaces? What and where is the home office and home workspace? What where is exercise and entertainment space? What where are storage and utility spaces? And yes, some of those I consider to be trick questions. More on that. And a little postscript, note the kitchen, bathrooms, and bedrooms are usually easier to locate and define in a traditional home, except that some bedrooms are now multi-purpose, and some garages and may double as storage space, exercise, or workspaces. And in the north, of course, we have something called attics and basements, which are what I would consider wild cards, something we're not dealing with too often in Florida. So the 3 points, where did the housing boom come from? What defined the house and how did it get to be what it is today, and what challenges we have today looking forward? And of course, my premise is we are getting caught a little bit on a treadmill, the traditional treadmill of folks buying homes based on what they can afford, or what they can stretch to afford, or what they can borrow to help them get into a home, with an idea typically being that the home tends to get larger and more expensive over time, which may not be desirable, and which is also occurring at the same time as the design and utility of a home, which has often gotten a little bit lost in this process, is becoming more critical as more things are being done at home, which the last 12 months has given us a peek into the future. So let me just stop there for a minute and see if anyone has any questions. Does any of that make sense? Does anybody have strong agreement or disagreement with any of those points?
Please feel free either to add a question in the chat, put up your hand, or just speak out with a question.
Well, Lou, this is Dick. I mean, it's obvious that this recent year, I mean, I know I've been working from home for 12 months. My wife has been working from home for 11 months. And so our concept of the home as a workplace has dramatically changed as opposed to prior to the pandemic. And I keep hearing that bricks and mortar may not be as valuable in the future now that corporations have gotten used to having their people work from home, and that could be the wave of the future. So I guess I'm curious as to what you're hearing on the street, so to speak, when you deal with real estate, prospective homeowners. I'm assuming you also deal with commercial as well.
Yep.
What are you hearing beyond what you've shared with us today?
Well, I think a lot of that's up in the air to a certain extent, Dick. And let me explain why I would sort of hedge and say up in the air. First observation I would make is I believe this process was already underway before the pandemic. Working for a large Fortune 500 employer over the last 15 plus years, one of the things we noticed is the work lifestyle, the workflow, and basically the nature of employment had changed for a variety of reasons, from competitive factors to technology factors to cost factors, and nowhere was that better illustrated than right here in Tampa Bay, where we had severe constraints on transportation flexibility and options. So one of the things that was happening in the last 10 to 20 years is everything changed from the nature of your job, where you did your job, to the work week over which you did your job. And what we were seeing before anything pandemic arose was that there were pieces in place that were starting to very creatively make work more flexible. And that flexibility was really for a variety of people. It was for the employer, the employee, and the family and society in general. And it had tremendous implications, including for the environment and for traditional constraints like, as I mentioned, transportation. So it's my feeling that the process had begun. The process was also impacted over the last 10, 20 years by the growth of international markets and the need to do business overseas, which immediately made a traditional Monday through Friday work week questionable. So aside from the normalcy of just where we were headed, we had this shock to the system that had come along. We had another significant one that occurred in the late 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, 8, where there was a housing crisis and a lending crisis that occurred. That was a shock to the system. Then this COVID pandemic came along, and that gave us another shock to the system, which also, aside from a health shock, was a financial shock because of what it did to everybody's ability to work. So what was already started as a process got sped up a little bit by this, which was really, frankly, amazing. If you stopped and think about what we asked the world to do within a matter of weeks, which was essentially reinvent yourselves and, not only work at home, but have your children at home and figure out how to educate them and figure out how to pay your bills and take care of things. It was a mammoth shock. But what it did was it took the seeds that were already planted, and it gave us a real sort of a slap in the face version of this is what things could look like. Now coming out of that, you have to say to yourself, where did we leave off? Are we going to go back to where we were? I don't think so. Are we going to go and stay permanently working from home? Of course not. But we're going to have some sort of evolution which is going to cause us to rethink the components of this conversation. One is how we work, where we work, when we work. And then what is the smart way to work? And even how are we going to educate our children? Because as you know at USF and being in education, and I know from being in a world that supported education, one of the things we were finding over this past 10, 20 years is the nature of education was changing because of the growth of cost. And so online learning was already on the radar. Restructuring of college education over different curriculums, different lengths of time, and different delivery formats, including distance learning, was already on the radar. So now I think what we're going to see is we're going to see where we were going. We're going to see what we've just been through. We're going to look at technology, and we're going to all be asked a lot of difficult questions about economics. One of the things that employers have to do and the providers of goods and services is not only do they have to look at their costs of making what they do available, they have to look at the cost of the ability of the consumer to react to what it is they want to deliver to them, what they want to sell to them. So everyone in the retail world is affected by this. Everyone in the restaurant business, everyone in education, financial services. We're all going to be impacted by this kind of new paradigm, which I have had fun in looking at from the point of view of home ownership. Because one of the things that's going on right now that is a bit of a cloak is that we have a very hot real estate market. Homes are selling at increasingly appreciated prices with shorter time on the market, and there seems to be a very slow and shrinking amount of inventory. I don't think that's as good as we would be led to believe. I think there's a big strain on affordable housing and middle-class housing, And we run the risk of finding ourselves with more house than we want and can afford, and a house that often perhaps is not designed in the smartest way, looking at this new future. So that was kind of the point of the presentation I made today. I wanted to get people's impression of what they were feeling from how their life had been affected, and how they thought this might affect their future decision as to the type of home they might buy, how much home, and what they'd want it to look like, and how they'd want to be able to manage it.
That's really interesting, and fascinating how things are changing and the knowledge you have. And Brittany Sampson put in the chat, she also said this is really interesting. And she was asking where do you get some of the data on the trends that you see?
Well, I get the data actually from all the traditional data that's being reported. I'm just interpreting it differently. For instance, the fact that homes are going up. You'll remember at the last financial crisis, home values were rapidly appreciating. Okay, and that was being driven by an incredible ease of access to debt. People were, every roadblock to being able to borrow money was being pushed aside. Appraisals were being taken advantage of. Lending criteria was being taken advantage of. And money was plentiful to allow people to have the money needed to buy housing. And lo and behold, a lot of people bought homes that they couldn't afford. We saw that, and we had a real crisis for about 5 or 6 years there that started in about 2005 or 6 and went through the end of that first decade. And I would question whether we're on the cusp of that again, because when housing values go up, you have to ask yourself, how sustainable is that? Because it's always a house of cards. If you're paying more and more, someone's going to get stuck with the house to sell that they can't find a buyer for. And then you find things collapse very quickly. So I would say rising prices are only good to the extent they're sustainable. Then the next question you have to ask is, who's buying these houses? And what's their reason for buying them? And then you have to ask yourself, what purpose are the houses serving? I'm raising all three questions. I'm raising the question of, how good is it that they're selling so quickly and going up in value? Who's buying them? And the collateral question to that is, who's unable to buy them? And what are they going to do with them? As we just learned over the last 12 to 18 months, the home might be something that needs to be rethought. Not only in terms of how much we want to spend for it, how big we want it to be, but how we're going to use it. I've been struggling with this, and I think it's something that is often ignored. And what I mean by that is, over my entire life, I think most homes that I've seen have continued to be built the same they were for prior generations. They have a design and a logic to them that is comfortable. You go to a home and you know what to expect when you knock on the front door. You kind of know what's on the other side of the door, and you know it's going to be a place you can get received, and there'll be something called an entry foyer and a front entrance and a place to hang your coat. There'll be a dining room and living room somewhere there and what have you. And I guess my point in that observation is, over the last 20 to 30 years, I've started to question all the nomenclature around the home. I believe the current homes are, let's just say, disconnected from reality. They are creatures of history and of our family heritage, and they make us comfortable. But to a large extent, they absorb a lot of our attention and our free capital by maintaining a structure that has much less utility than the home was originally intended to provide. We spend large sums for what up till the past year has been space that is often empty. Mm-hmm. Okay? We need a place to sleep. I question beyond taking a shower and sleeping. Most homes, I'm not sure what dining was occurring in the dining room and what living was occurring in the living room, and the kitchen was kind of a hanging out. But boy, a lot of people I know were eating out and ordering out. It just seemed like the home was sucking up. We were spending a lot of time working for it, and at the same time, we were buying homes that were getting bigger and bigger and more expensive. So I said to step back from that process, Deborah, and I said to myself, does this make sense? Now, I'm using the last 12 months as a unfortunate jump into the cold water of saying, well, wait a minute, maybe a pandemic isn't a natural life circumstance, but it sure gets to show us what some decisions and some stresses might be if we had to continue to do more out of the home, and if some of our financial flexibility and vocational flexibility we were to lose control of. Because when you start to have to pay a larger and ever-growing mortgage for a bigger and more expensive home, and that home doesn't do much for you, you're going to have questions like, is home ownership the right decision? So my point is, I don't think the home ownership has to be looked at as a bad decision. I think the type of home, the design of the home, and the flexibility of the home. And I noticed in the earlier presentation today in some of the modules, I saw a lot of assumptions in some of the modules that were on display in the programs you put together. Some of the things I could see occurring were the assumption that the only way to buy a home is with a mortgage.
Okay.
The assumption that you'd probably, a sub-assumption of that is you'd probably want to borrow as much money as you could. The assumption would be you may or may not want to refinance at some point. You may or may not want to do a home equity line. Everything's about the inclusion and manipulation of the financing around the home. The home almost becomes your own personal bank, in which you have a debt structure and a line of credit with which to expend money. I think that's all wrong. I think that's the financial industry and the home building industry and the real estate industry essentially perpetuating what we see in all the other industries around us, which is giving us something we can spend our money on. And before long, we've got college loans, home loans, car loans, loans, refinance loans. And I've often said that the most devious, one of the sneakiest, most devious financial instruments I've ever seen. And of course, you remember I worked in that industry.
Yes.
But the home equity line, and the HELOC, home equity line or home mortgage, second mortgage or lines of credit, were traditional ways of getting us to spend what we spent all that effort building, which was equity. So I'm using all of these little observations, and what I'm saying is it's time to re-examine the home buying process and the utility around the home in a really smart way, the way we go to school to learn how to be smart, which is to get off the escalator for a moment, get off the moving pathway and start say, whoa, how am I going to use this asset? How much, where does it fit? What do I want it to do for me? How long am I going to hold it? How do I want to pay for it? How am I going to measure if I'm doing this successfully? Now, a lot of people will measure home ownership based on their zip code. Mm-hmm. They'll base it based on how cool it is to drive to my home in the neighborhood I live in. How do I feel driving up to the home? And those are all important things. But I'm saying we're talking about financial literacy and the astute way we go about saving and spending and utilizing our money. I think we could do a vastly better job in looking at all these questions about the home, including getting right down to redesigning the actual footprint and floor plan of the home. And this last 12 months gave us a way to do that, that was forced on us, which I think was, ironically, a very good thing.
Lots of things, crazy going on. And yes, and you said that to me when we were discussing this a couple of times in our interviews before the session. And some really interesting things have gone on, and people are questioning things now. And we have some great questions that came in the chat room by some of the participants. So I'll just go over some of those. Joseph Bedard said that he's debating whether it makes more sense to put money in the stock market, like a diversified index funds, as opposed to isolating it in one real estate asset. What do you think?
I think it's a great question, and it lends itself to this discussion perfectly, because what I can probably answer that is there's a traditional conservative methodology called diversification, and I think you used a term of some sort of was it a mutual fund? I forget what he said, suggested as an investment, but essentially it is looking to diversify how much money you have in any one type of exposure. So that's essentially what we're saying about the home, your primary residence, let's call it, the home you may live in and perhaps someday work out of or educate your children out of, or what have you. It seems to me that we ought to put the same rigor into where we put our money, no matter where it is. If it's in financial markets, if it's in bank accounts, if it's in real estate, if it's in collectibles, if it's in Bitcoin, if it's in Krugerrands, if it's in precious metals, if it's in diamonds, gold, bullion, silver, you name it. There are people who've made money doing a lot of these things, and the thing to remember about financial markets or home markets is, for every buyer there's a seller. And so you can't really ever look at the transaction. If you look at a transaction one way, you haven't really understood the whole transaction. Because really the way to look at a home is that somebody either built it or sold it, somebody bought it. Two sides were impacted. Same thing with a financial transaction. You buy a share of stock, somebody sold it. So in terms of a zero-sum game, there's oftentimes winners and losers on the same transaction. So you can't always say that, well, prices are going up. Well, that doesn't benefit everybody. And so looking at where you might put your money, one of the things that is a good byproduct of this is the less you spend on a house, the more you have to diversify. And one of the ways you can diversify, which is kind of counterintuitive, but you can diversify your assets by having two homes instead of one. No, think about the best investment you'll ever make is probably your first home. In often cases it is. Now, most people, because of the way they get wrapped around the axle, they need the equity in their current home to buy a second home. I'm suggesting that doesn't have to be the case. It has to be the case when you're always maxing out every subsequent purchase. But let's say, for instance, you live in your house long enough to build up a lot of equity, and then you buy another home of about the same size, and you just repeat the process without raising the price. You keep the first home. Or you borrow a little bit against the first home just to give you your down payment on the second home. Or you put your children in the second home or another family member. You start to build the wealth that investors are typically getting by buying these properties from you. The other thing is the management of debt. A house is, for most of us, the taking on of a structure as well as a huge financial obligation called a loan, a note, and a mortgage. And if you manage that haphazardly, you don't have enough equity to do a lot of these very flexible things. One of the trouble with home equity is the creation of the HELOC line and the home equity line and so forth is that it was used to encourage people. We're using it as a means of financing other purchases. They were telling you, oh, don't take a car loan. If you want to go on a vacation, buy a boat, buy a jet ski, get a second car, whatever, borrow against your home. Well, you have to step back from that for a minute and you say, well, what's in it for you? Why do you want me to do this? Well, of course, I want you to spend money. But see, the nice thing about having money at the end of the day is when opportunity comes along, you can buy the stocks you want, you can buy the house you want, you can make the wise moves without having to take on more debilitating forms of debt. The largest asset, the best investment, the average American, it's been said over and over again, the average American family will make would be the purchase of their primary residence. The last thing we want to do is then play games with the equity they've built in it.
Agreed.
That's true.
The home equity line is an evil thing.
Yeah.
So Mary Barthy had a comment. She said that students are playing the stock market game and they're investing in REITs or big builder stocks. And the students think it's a smarter idea than buying a home. And so far they're doing well. What do you think about that?
Well, they are, by doing something like that, that's a type of derivative investment. You can play the housing market with derivatives. You can buy home builders. You can buy REITs. You can buy anybody in the real estate business. You can buy raw materials. If you really think so highly of the home, you can invest in lumber. You can buy land. There's a lot of what you can buy land because timber's on it, or you can buy land because people want the land to build homes on. There's a infinite amount of ways. If you really think if you think you're onto something, there's a lot of ways to play that. Unfortunately, none of them are as good, nor do you have as much control over any of those investments as you do over your own home. Because by living in something and touching it and feeling it and using it and smelling it and cleaning it and painting it and grooming it, you learn it very well. Very few people who buy stock know as much about a company as they do about their home. Plus, there are certain financial benefits to owning a home. So I would say there's a place for the home in everyone's portfolio. It just doesn't have to be as large a percent of their net worth, of their balance sheet. And they can buy, and if you're going to buy stocks, same principle of diversification. And just because you've bought a mutual fund doesn't mean you're diversified. You have to really understand what diversification means. And you might want to have a little bit in a lot of different things, but make sure you understand what the principle of diversification about. And really the premise of my points today was you're not diversified when you have a home that is costing you too much to maintain and you have too much debt on it. You're actually non-diversified in the most important decision you'll ever make. I'm suggesting you do so actually more astutely, more aggressively by challenging the assumptions of that you want a lot of debt on your home and you want to keep buying larger and more expensive homes. I think a home that is sound, that meets your needs, is a wiser investment than a more expensive home. And it certainly presents less risk.
And we talked about that too now in COVID, not only some changing opinions over what home ownership, the type of home ownership means today, but also the ways in which the home is used or rooms in the home. We had some comments come in on the chat. Brittany Sampson talking about, I wonder if you're finding people believing that dining rooms are antiquated, like we're forced to be at home now. And many of us are finding different uses for those rooms. Like, could we put chairs at an island or tabletop bar, or, what is the living room and what is it becoming, and how are things transforming in these ways? What are you seeing?
I think that's spot on. It's exactly the 100% behind this whole case I'm trying to build, that type of thinking I'm asking everyone to do. I'll give you an interesting example of that. I sometimes walk around my neighborhood at night. I go for walks. I go somewhere I'm walking, and at night it's a wonderful time to walk around. In most neighborhoods, I'm talking about the north side of St. Pete now. A lot of older homes, nice neighborhoods, easy to see into the homes from the sidewalk. Not that I'm a peeping Tom, but one of the things I noticed is how many, what I believe to have been the majority of the cases, how many dining rooms are being used by kids doing their homework and being on a computer. And I'm telling you, I rarely saw people eating in dining rooms. You rarely see that. If it's not Thanksgiving, you're not seeing it. Okay. But I saw a lot of people hanging out in the dining room, obviously not doing dining. So I would take the point one step further. I think it's time to, call it what it is. I think it's time to stop being, too beholding and too condescending to traditional home nomenclature. I see no reason why the home has to be designed and used the way these archaic names are. And we saw this there are certain parts of the world and certain cities where they have lofts and open space where people have been doing this for a long time. I think it's time for the rest of us to just catch up and create the flex home. And in the flex home, essentially, you'll have plenty of space. It's almost like a Montessori approach. Or even a business approach. You see it sometimes even in hotels. There are people who are getting smarter about how to utilize space, but you can have fun with it. And this is where I was thinking maybe the students and the children and the children in a home or the students in a classroom could come and be given a wonderful exercise and said, how would you redesign your home?
Uh-huh.
How do you want to spend your time? Do you want it chopped up? Do you want to have something called a living room, something called a dining room, something called a library, something called an entrance hall, a parlor? Give me a break. I can't tell you how many homes I've gone to that I've never gone in the front door.
Wow.
I don't even know what the front door is about in most homes. Someplace, I guess, for Amazon to leave your stuff so it can be stolen. I just think it's crazy to spend our time and money on space that we heat and air condition and mortgage and insure and maintain, but we don't utilize. Why not make it fun space? And all we need to do is get some smart designers to spend a little less time on traditional design and just get that creative juice flowing. I think the average home is about twice the size it needs to be. Let's say I'm half right. Let's say it's not half. Let's say it's only 50%. It's not 100%. In other words, my point would be, if you're in a 4,000 square foot home, you could probably get by nicely in a 2,000 square foot home. Let's say I'm half wrong. Let's say it's only 1,000 feet. Whatever. You're paying for that. If you're paying for 4,000 feet and you only need 3, and that's 33%, right? That you're paying every month. It's unnecessary.
Wow.
And that's doesn't begin the costs that aren't bookkeep. There's a lot of costs there that aren't part of accounting, like environmental costs or stress. How are you going to measure your stress of having to pay for stuff that isn't of high utility? How do you measure that? How do you measure wasting of energy? How do you measure, all that extra space that just sits there and sucks, sucks the time just to have, literally the time to just have to worry about it.
Absolutely.
You've probably heard over the past generation things called minimalism. You probably heard people who are experts to come in and help you declutter. This is all part of the same minimalism movement, the decluttering movement, right sizing. But what I'm saying is, it comes into the basic housing decision, which was exacerbated over the last 12 months by people having to work from home and teach their children from home. It made me relook at the whole paradigm and say, what are we missing here? How can we should be able to do this better? And we don't want the industry to keep selling us more and more expensive homes. It's their game. You don't want to play their game.
There's yes, I know. And I have another question coming in from Tina Fields. She's typing right now. I don't know. Oh, there it came in. The more space you have, the more stuff you accumulate. And we are getting ready to sell a 4-bedroom house now. We've had since 2003 so much stuff.
Well, who wants to have a house that's empty?
Right.
What the first mistake you do is you buy the bigger house, and it's funny because I don't mean to preach. I'm going through this myself. I've made these mistakes. Please do not take anything that I have to say in a smart-ass, condescending type of way. I am what I'm talking about. But you can see the people who go through model homes, the people who talk to the builders and the architects and the interior designers, the people who go to home shows. You can see the wheels turning. I can describe to you the mindset and the emotional energy and the internal self-talk that's occurring as people tour IKEA or a home show or all of these things. You can see that's, oh, I know what I'm going to put there. There's what I'm going to, that's what we're going to use this for. This is where this is going to go. They're filling it up as they're sizing it up. And as you know, life throws at us these extravagances. It's funny, if you think about your life, you can plot out your life and quote the luggage that comes with it. When you finish school, you have all the stuff from your childhood that sometimes follows you around. Then you get married and you get a spouse and they bring all their stuff. Then your kids bring all their stuff. Then the kids leave but their stuff doesn't go with them. Then sometimes you inherit stuff from your parents or extended family. All of that stuff is desperately looking for space. And what you do is you carry it around with you, and then God forbid you move it. Oh my God, then you're spent the money in moving it as well. But yes, if you examine what you use, that's part of this healthy process, which is how are you rationalizing the space you're paying and the burden it puts on you to maintain it. And remember also, this was another good thing about COVID, forcing us to be home for 12 months. The average home is empty a good part of the day.
Yes.
It doesn't have a second shift. It doesn't have a second and third shift. It can't even be utilized the smart way we sometimes use businesses.
Wow. I never thought of it that way. That's
it's critical to think about that. Just think about the average home. You get there, you work late because you had to work hard because make the money to pay for this albatross. You get home, you can't enjoy it because you're rushing around to walk the dog and open the mail and throw meal on the table, maybe to help the kids with homework. Before long, you got to hit the bed, clock set, you got to wake up and get the hell out of there. Mm-hmm. 2/3 of it, that might be a slight exaggeration, but at least half of it goes empty. It's as much as 2/3. A half to 2/3 of the home is empty most of the time. Of course, we have a housing crisis and a homeless crisis because the poor people who can't get a place because they're walking by on the street all these empty houses.
Oh.
That's another political comment that I just threw in there. But my point is, whether you agree or not, it's healthy to have an attitude that at least asks the question, how much am I buying? Because remember, I want to make one final point here. You can get a larger home and it doesn't have to be more expensive. You can buy a more expensive home and it doesn't have to be larger. You do not have to start down the path that I need a home, but even if you do, it doesn't have to be bigger, Doesn't have to be more expensive. Keep those in mind. And when you look at a house, ask yourself, how well designed is it? What am I going to use the space? And how can I be smart about this? Look at what people do with attics, basements, and garages. Do you know how many people fill their garages up with stuff that isn't a car? Oh my God.
Well, then think about all those shows you see with the storage spaces. So then not only filling up your own storage, but then getting storage spaces that you have to pay a monthly fee to store more stuff. That's a whole other webinar on stuff, isn't it?
Well, that's a wonderful webinar, but that is a great illustration of the almost humorous, it is humorous, it's not almost, the humorous nature of how we manage the things we have.
Absolutely.
Because there are actually people, and I will say this because I have been one of them. There are people who actually believe they're saving money by getting a storage space. Now, I'm not even going to go into it.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
Don't
goodness.
even go in. Just ask yourself the question. It's almost like the people who say, well, I bought two, so I saved money because buy one, get half off the second one. So I bought two and I saved money.
Right.
Okay. Show me the money you saved. Well, I saved the half on the second. You see where I'm going with this. So there are actually people who believe that storage spaces save them money.
Right. And so that's another thing that we could that we could talk about not the craziness I'm saying, it's just we try to make sense of things for ourselves.
Of course.
I just want to pause for just a second. Two things. One thing is that for all of you who attended, I did put a link. As I said earlier, I put the link to the resources up further in the chat. I could put it in again, but what I did put right now is a link to the survey that we ask you to fill in following the session. So that I put that link in the chat, and that's a link to our survey form. And I know that I'm also going to be putting the resources link in one more time, or maybe Jennifer is, because she's typing right now. And I'm going to just say that, oh, she did. She put the resources. Thank you so much, Jennifer, as always. And Dick has his hand up for a question also. So I'd like to give him the opportunity to ask his question now.
Well, we're out of time, Deborah. I feel sensitive for the time for the teachers. I'll just make it a quick comment.
Okay.
I thought when the world went through that global calamity in 2008, 2009, it was essentially the same problem, assuming debt that most people couldn't handle because it was easy to get money. And I thought, my gosh, why haven't we learned that lesson? I look around in my neighborhood and I see houses that are going for $650,000. And I'm thinking, why? And then I see the folks who buy them and I think, how do they think they can possibly afford this? And the only thing I can conclude is that they think that in a year or less, they're going to flip it and make a ton of money. But all they need to have is an economy that's on the downswing, where they may lose their job, they may get their hours cut, a host of things may happen, and they can't afford their own mortgage, much less try to sell it. So I just don't understand why we can't learn the lessons of the past so that we can avoid repeating those problems in the present. I see it every day here in my own little neighborhood.
Yep.
And I just wanted to mention that right now, thank you. I just wanted to say a little thank you, or a big thank you, huge thank you to educators who have joined us this evening. And Jennifer has also put our website, usf.edu/Stavros/programs in the chat, where you could go to find more webinars that we'll have coming up. And I know that some of you might still have questions, so I don't want to hold those of you who signed up for something till 6:30. So thank you so much for attending, those of you who are going to need to go, and we have given you the information that you need, and thank you so much. We hope to see you soon. But if there's anyone else who still has a question, please feel free to ask those questions. Does anyone else have any questions? I'll watch for them in the chat, or if you want to put up your hand or just unmute yourself and ask out loud.
It was a fantastic discussion, and I agree with him completely, because I love watching these people drive into these storage sheds, and they think they're saving all this money, and they have all this stuff that they're never using. But they just keep putting more and more and more in it for $50 a month, and I just laugh, because 50 times 12 is a nice chunk of change.
Yes.
Most of them are a lot more than 50 a month.
Well, if you want to get the air conditioning ones, of course.
Yeah.
It is Florida.
Yep.
But my dad always said, whenever we went shopping, he said, "Oh, you saved $100? Then I'd like to have the $100. Please give it to me, and I'll take it in any denomination."
Exactly.
Barry Barfield said this all was a very interesting perspective, a very unique perspective, and that in saying some of the things we're talking about now is we need to learn more about simplifying your life trend from an economic perspective. That's a great idea. A great suggestion. Anyone else?
Lou, I don't want you to get away without us thanking you so very much.
Absolutely.
For sharing your thoughts and ideas with us, with the teachers. We very much appreciate that. Again, I don't want to take anything away from the teachers' time, but I want to make sure that you know how appreciative we are.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. And as we said, it would be nice when we're back in person to do this in a workshop format where we could have more people working on ideas. I'd love to re-explore that. And I also thank you for all the time you spent educating me about this topic before the session.
You're very welcome. You know what I'm going to suggest? I'll leave you with a parting thought. I think a good exercise for this program, if we do another one in person later in the year, next year, whatever, is ask as a homework assignment for the people who attend to bring to the meeting their version of a redesign for the modern home.
That would be interesting. We could have the whole workshop be, and then we could talk about it as we go through. It would be, what have you done and why? Oh, that would be a lot of fun. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions? I don't see anything else coming in the chat, and I think I don't hear anyone. I don't see any hands up. So I think we're good. And just also thanking Brittany for coming and joining us tonight to help us share some of those lessons, and thanking Jody Pushkin for the collaboration we have with the Tampa Bay Times and being able to use their materials in our lessons. We appreciate that. And we just have another thing. Oh, one more thing coming in and typing. Thank you. It was amazing information. So you're getting some great feedback from people in the chat. Thank you so much, Lou. I so appreciate your time and your knowledge.
You're very welcome. Thank you. It was fun, and I hope everyone has something to think about.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care, Lou. Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.